Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself for a second. Have you ever had one of those moments where your stomach just drops? You're driving to work, maybe already a little late, nothing dramatic, just another normal day, and then out of nowhere, that little check engine light comes on. Not flashing, not screaming, just quietly glowing on the dashboard, like it knows something you don't. And right away, your brain starts doing that thing it always does. You tell yourself it's probably nothing. You turn the radio up a little louder to drown out the noise you swear wasn't there before. You make a mental note to deal with it later, because later feels safer than right now. Now here's the part most people don't say out loud. It's not that you don't want to fix it. It's that when you check your bank account, you realize you've got $40-something left until Friday. And suddenly a $300 repair might as well be $3,000. So you keep driving. You hope, you pray, you tell yourself you'll get through just one more week. My name is Grandma Investor, and I've been around long enough to see this exact moment play out thousands of times, in my own life and in the lives of people I care about. And what looks like a small decision right here is almost never small. It's usually the beginning of something much more expensive, even if you can't see it yet. At first, nothing really happens. The car still runs. You still get to work. Life goes on. And that's what makes this so dangerous, because your brain takes that as proof that you made the right call. See? I was worried for nothing. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. And every time you hear that faint rattle or feel something slightly off, you push the thought away, because thinking about it costs energy. And energy is something you don't have when money is tight. Then one day, usually at the worst possible moment, everything catches up at once. The car doesn't limp anymore. It dies. Maybe it's on the highway. Maybe it's raining. Now you're not talking about a $300 fix. You're talking about a tow truck that costs $200. You're talking about real damage, the kind that happens when a small problem is ignored for too long. The original issue takes out something bigger. The bill jumps to $2,000 before you even have time to process it. And because you can't get to work, you miss shifts. That's another few $100s gone. So that original $300 you didn't have, it quietly turned into a $2,500 disaster. And this is the part I need you to really hear. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't irresponsibility. This wasn't you being careless. This was math. Cold, predictable, unforgiving math that punishes you for not having cash when the problem was still small. Here's where I want you to pause for a second, because this is the point where most people turn that frustration inward. They say, if I were better with money, this wouldn't have happened. They say, I should have planned better. But that story feels true only because no one ever explains what's actually happening underneath. What you just lived through isn't a personal failure. It's a penalty. A very specific one. Being broke isn't just hard. It's expensive. And I don't mean emotionally. I mean mathematically. When you don't have cash on hand, the world charges you extra for everything. Not because you're irresponsible, but because you don't get access to the cheaper options. You don't get the early fixes. You don't get the low-risk choices. You get the late fees, the emergency rates, the worst timing, and the highest interest. I've watched this cycle repeat for decades. People think poverty is about bad habits, but habits don't explain why the same problems always cost more when you have less. What's really happening is that the system quietly taxes you for being broke. It's a poverty penalty that shows up after the fact, when it's already too late to avoid it. And once you see that clearly, something important shifts. You stop asking, what did I do wrong? And you start asking, why does every small mistake cost me so much more? Let me give you a simple story, because once you see this, you won't be able to unsee it. Years ago, I came across what's known as the boots theory, and it explains this entire mess better than most personal finance books ever will. Picture two people. One has money, the other doesn't. The one with money walks into a store and buys a solid pair of boots for $50. Real leather, stitched properly, built to last. Those boots keep their feet dry for 10 years. The other person doesn't have $50. They have 10, so they buy the cheap boots. Thin soles, cardboard inside, barely holding together. They last one season. Next year, they're back buying another $10 pair. And the year after that. Over the same 10 years, the person who couldn't afford the good boots ends up spending $100, double what the wealthy person paid. And here's the cruel part. After all that spending, their feet are still wet. This is the math of being poor. You don't pay less because you buy cheap. You pay more because you're forced to buy short-term solutions over and over again. The person with money doesn't just save $50. They save time. They save stress. They save mental energy. And the person without money stays stuck replacing the same broken thing, wondering why it never seems to get better. Once you understand the boots theory, you start seeing it everywhere. And honestly, that's when it gets uncomfortable. Because this isn't some abstract idea. It's baked into daily life. Take something as boring as toilet paper. If you've got $50 to spare, you go to a big box store and buy the mega pack. The cost per roll is cheap, and you don't think about toilet paper again for months. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have $50 to tie up in toilet paper. You've got 4. So you go to the corner store and buy the small pack. The cost per roll is 3 times higher for the exact same product. You are literally paying more for the privilege of having less money. And it doesn't stop with groceries. Look at the banking system. If you keep $10,000 in your checking account, banks treat you like a valued customer. No fees, no penalties, maybe even a little interest. But if you've got $20 in your account and a forgotten subscription hits for $25, now you're negative, and the bank doesn't care that you were $5 short. They charge you a $35 overdraft fee. You effectively borrowed $5 for a day and paid an interest rate that would be illegal anywhere else. Then there's transportation. A person with savings buys a reliable used car, maybe a few years old, at a low interest rate. It runs for years with basic maintenance. A person without savings ends up at a buy here, pay here lot, paying 24% APR on a car that's already on its last legs. Over time, they pay double or triple what the car is worth, and it still breaks down before the loan is paid off. That's not bad decision-making. That's a lack of options. Housing works the same way. Renters pay every month and build nothing. Owners pay less over time and build equity. But to buy, you need a down payment. And when rent eats half your income, saving that down payment feels impossible. So the person with less money pays more every month for less stability, while the person with money lowers their costs and grows wealth at the same time. Once you see this pattern, it's impossible to deny. The system isn't neutral. It quietly rewards liquidity and punishes scarcity over and over again. Now here's the part most people completely miss, and it's the reason all of this feels so hard to escape. Being broke doesn't just drain your bank account. It hijacks your brain when you're constantly worried about money. When you don't know how you're going to cover rent or keep the lights on next month, your mind goes into survival mode. And survival mode is terrible at planning ahead. There's real research behind this. When financial stress is high, your cognitive bandwidth shrinks. Your brain becomes obsessed with immediate problems because it has to be. Long-term thinking feels like a luxury. It's been shown that chronic money stress can drop your functional IQ by more than 10 points. That's the mental equivalent of being sleep-deprived every single day. So when someone takes a payday loan with outrageous interest, or ignores a warning sign, or makes a decision that looks reckless from the outside, it's not because they're stupid. It's because their mental energy is already maxed out, just trying to get through the week. And this is where the boots theory goes deeper than money. The person with resources doesn't just buy better things. They buy peace of mind. They don't have to think about their car breaking down or their bank account overdrafting. They get to use their brain for growth instead of damage control. The person without money is stuck in a constant, low-level panic, reacting instead of choosing. Once you understand that, you stop judging the behavior and start seeing the trap for what it really is. This is where most financial advice completely loses the plot. Everyone tells you to focus on returns. Invest here. Grow that. Beat the market. But if you're stuck paying 20% interest on a credit card or rolling one emergency into another, The stock market is not your biggest problem. Your biggest problem is the money leaking out of your life faster than you can patch it. The first real win isn't getting rich, it's stopping the bleeding. When you don't have a buffer, every small problem becomes an emergency, and emergencies are always expensive. But once you build even a modest cushion, the rules start to change. That first $1,000 in the bank doesn't make you wealthy, but it makes you less punishable. A flat tire becomes annoying instead of catastrophic. A medical bill becomes a plan instead of panic. You stop reaching for high-interest fixes because you don't have to. This is why paying off high-interest debt often beats any smart investment you could make. If a credit card is charging you 20% APR, eliminating that balance is a guaranteed 20% return. No market volatility. No guessing. Just math working in your favor for once. And the same logic applies everywhere. Buying the reliable appliance instead of replacing the cheap one every year. Fixing the small problem before it destroys something bigger. These choices don't feel exciting, but they quietly remove future penalties. Once you understand this, your mindset shifts. You stop asking, "How can I grow my money?" And you start asking, "What expense only exists because I don't have cash?" And that question is where real progress begins. Here's the cruel twist I've seen over and over again. The moment a little money finally shows up, the pressure lifts just enough that you want to breathe. You want to feel normal. You've been saying no to yourself for so long that the first instinct is to say yes. A nice dinner, a new shirt, a weekend you didn't plan for. And I get it, because deprivation does things to people. But this is where the trap snaps shut again. Those purchases don't actually solve anything. They just make the present feel quieter for a moment while the future stays loud. You're not rewarding yourself. You're postponing the problem. And the system loves this because it keeps you cycling through short-term relief instead of long-term stability. The uncomfortable truth is that real financial relief almost never feels good in the moment. Paying for the dentist before the pain gets unbearable. Replacing the worn tires before winter hits. Buying the appliance that won't need replacing next year. These decisions don't feel like treats. They feel boring. But boring is powerful. Boring means fewer emergencies, fewer late fees, fewer moments where everything stacks up at once. When money is scarce, every dollar has a job. And the most important job, especially early on, isn't pleasure. It's removing one more reason your future self will have to panic. Once you start seeing spending this way, the temptation changes. You stop asking what will make today easier, and you start asking what will make tomorrow cheaper. By now, I want you to understand something clearly. This game is not fair. It takes far more effort to climb out of the first hole than it does to build on top of money you already have. The wind is in your face at the beginning, and pretending otherwise only makes people feel worse when progress is slow. So if you've been blaming yourself for struggling, it's time to stop. You weren't failing at money. You were paying penalties no one ever warned you about. The way out isn't dramatic. It's not flashy, and it won't impress anyone on social media. You escape this trap one enemy at a time. Not 10. Not everything at once. Just one. Find the single expense in your life that only exists because you don't have cash. The late fee. The high-interest balance. The repair you've been postponing that keeps getting worse. That's the first thing you attack. Everything else becomes background noise until that leak is sealed. I've learned this the long way. Liquidity is not about feeling rich. It's about buying yourself options. Options to say no to bad loans. Options to fix small problems early. Options to think clearly instead of panicking. When you start building that buffer, even slowly, the system begins to treat you differently. And more importantly, you start treating yourself differently. If this story felt uncomfortably familiar, share it with someone who needs to hear it. We talk a lot about wins, but we don't talk enough about traps. And once you see the math behind them, you can finally stop playing defense and start taking your life back.